Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Please get seated. We'll get started now. Assalamu alaikum. Please take your seats. We'll start shortly. We're about to start. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I start in the name of Allah, the most beneficent and most merciful. And I would like to start our second half with another short prayer from one of our Jewish brother who's here. And I'd like to invite Brother Phil Gearson. He's been an interfaith leader for 15 years, and I would like to invite him to come up here for just a short, maybe 1 or 2 minute prayer, and then we will introduce Ambassador Rasul. So please help me welcome Mr. Phil Gearson.
It's a pleasure to be here, and you know that that this mosque is my second favorite place to worship in the Seattle area. But I want to tell you quickly, and then I'll say it's a very short prayer, but a number of us just returned from the Balkans in a visit to Macedonia, Albania, Bosnia, and what's the other one? Albania. And you know, during the Nazi era, during the Holocaust, there were 3 religious factions. The Croats were Roman Catholics, and they sided with the Nazis. The Serbs were Orthodox, and they sided with the Russians and so forth. But the Bosnians were, of course, Muslim. So the Jewish congregation that we went to, the historian said that during the Holocaust, 5% of the Jewish population in Croatia survived. 10% of the Jewish population in Serbia survived. In Bosnia, 35% survived. And that was a direct bearing of the Bosnians helping their Jewish neighbors. So that's special. So it shows that, and then of course, the Bosnians in 92 to 95 were subject to ethnic cleansing when they lost about 150,000 people during the war. And we're making a film with Pacifica and Tezjan here. So the prayer is a very simple prayer. And what it says is, thank you, God, for getting us to this place together, because we're at a special point, and you know, we've listened to the speakers. So it goes, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehachianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Thank you for bringing us here together, because some very important things will happen here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phil Gearson, for your wonderful prayer and speech. Appreciate it. Next, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul. Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul is a distinguished scholar in residence at Georgetown University's Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service. He works in the Center of Muslim-Christian Understanding and Countering Extremisms with an alternative paradigm. He is the founder of the World for All Foundation that endeavors to create a world of coexistence that is safe. Ambassador Rasul has recently completed a term of duty as South Africa's ambassador to the United States and has a distinguished and recognized career throughout his life. He personally knew President Nelson Mandela, and he was actively part of ending the apartheid. So I mean, how often do we get to meet someone like that? Ambassador Rasul was here with us last year, and I had the privilege of spending some time, and we went to a radio interview. So I heard some things that really moved me. I asked him, I said, you know, Ambassador, you risked your life. You did so much. I mean, what motivated you to do it? He said there was so much injustice in apartheid. There was so much wrong that I had to get involved. I had to become a part of it. So it was really moving. I mean, there's so much more I can talk about it, but I would really like to give him the microphone now, and I'd like to invite Ambassador Ibrahim Rasul. We will also pass out the cards for Q&A. So I'll give you the card, and just write down which speaker the question is from, 1, 2, or 3, or no number, and then we'll ask the question. Thank you.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, the President of the Muslim Association of Puget Sound, the Imam, the committee members, the congregation, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. To our guests, the leaders of different faith communities, from the police department, from the civic leaders, community leaders who are here, peace be upon you and good evening. I want to say to you that it is for me a moving experience to be in the United States of America at this time. It reminded me when I came in here and saw all of you. It reminded me of a time a few years ago when in Cape Town, I was governor of the Western Cape, and a good anti-apartheid stalwart was being installed as the moderator of his church. They invited me to speak at his inauguration, and I scoured the New Testament to find something that would express to him what I was feeling in a language and in a narrative that he would understand. And I stumbled upon the first epistle of St. John, which says, who lives in love lives in God and God in them. And it ends with a ringing phrase, this you must know, I have given you of my Spirit. And it reminded me of a verse I had encountered in the Quran on a few occasions, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحٍ, when God says, I have blown of my Spirit into you. And I thought, how coincidence is this? That two faiths speak the same language about the essence of humanity. And after I had done that, a Jewish friend came up and said, in the book of Isaiah, it says, and I blow my Spirit into you through my nostrils, through your nostrils. And then I discovered that if all the Abrahamic faiths say that we are all in possession of the Spirit of God, then why is it that human beings in their encounter with each other see the skin color before they see the Spirit, see the hair type before they see the Spirit, hear the language spoken before they hear the Spirit, see how people pray to God before they see the Spirit submitting to God? And so I think that if ever there was a moment in human history that we need to confirm that while we may be with those who don't look like us, pray like us, eat like us, dress like us, talk like us, we need to be more united across those differences so that in the spirit that we share, the peace of the divine that we all carry, that we reverence that we revere that we respect that, so that we see each other as fellow carriers of a piece of the divine within us. And that's the challenge that humanity faces. And if you think that it has not yet reached Washington State, it is only in Georgia and other places, I think we need to make sure that we immunize Washington State and use tonight as almost we take our children to an inoculation clinic so that the spirit may always be alive in Washington State, and this will be a bastion free of all the other isms and phobias that adorn the world today. That if we think that this is now a Trump moment only in the United States, let us understand that Britain has had its moment with Brexit, that France will have its moment with Marine Le Pen, that the Red Star in Italy is having its moment, that Hungary is having its moment, that Geert Wilders is in Holland. And so there are these many people who come up, who try and besiege the human spirit in a time of general uncertainty. And we are in a time of uncertainty. And in a time of uncertainty, people clutch at anyone who shows them strength. People clutch at anyone who speaks to their heart of fear. And therefore, this is the moment when we need to say to each other, how do we hold hands? We too are uncertain. We too don't know what the future holds. We too don't know where we will be tomorrow. But we do know that our uncertainty about tomorrow must not lead to our destruction today and our division today. That in the United States particularly, our MC reminded me of my association with Nelson Mandela. And let me tell you this little story. In 1987, I was a guest of the apartheid police in Pollsmoor prison, where Nelson Mandela also was a prisoner for the latter part of his 27 years. And one day, a warden came to me and said to me that Nelson Mandela wants to see me. And that made prison worthwhile. That made 6 months of solitary confinement worthwhile. And I met Nelson Mandela, and he said to me, how are the other political detainees? And I said, it's very difficult because we have some children as young as 12 and some adults as old as 89. And he said, you know, after 27 years in prison, I have certain privileges, like being able to watch movies. Now, some of you may be too young to remember that before we played movies on a projector, and the film came in those big reels that you had to wind through. And Nelson Mandela had one of that. And he said, I will watch my movie on a Friday night, and I will send the projector to your section on a Saturday night. And I went to the other detainees and I said, this is what Nelson Mandela said. And we expected that we would, for the next few weeks of our detention, be watching Police Academy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then, when the first Saturday came, Nelson Mandela sent us what he was watching. He was watching a documentary called The Peopling of America. And for the next few weeks, we were watching with Nelson Mandela what the role of indigenous Americans were. When the slaves came and what they contributed. When the Italians came, where they settled and what they contributed. When the Irish came after the potato blight, where they settled and what they contributed. When the Scandinavians came, when the Germans came, when the Dutch came, when every generation came. And when we were both free from prison, I traveled with Nelson Mandela through North Africa, looking at all the pharaohs of North Africa that Professor Oda spoke about, and I sat in their palaces and I met them in their homes. And on the strip, I said to Nelson Mandela, Madiba, what was that all about? He said, I knew we would be free. I wasn't sure whether I'd be able to see it, but just in case we were going to have the opportunity to govern a post-apartheid South Africa, I wanted to see from a country that had taken diversity and turned it into a united nation. I feel almost relieved that Nelson Mandela that learned so much from American diversity, from American cohesion, from America's ability to turn multiculturalism into the greatest economic, technological power in the world, that is not here to see where some of these things are going to. And therefore, we are not asking Americans to do something alien to your history, alien to your culture, alien to your constitution, alien to everything that you are in your being as American. We are asking you simply to do what you have always done. And that is to welcome the stranger. To always see who is a good individual and who is a bad individual, and not who is a good group and who is a bad group. Because if people had the attitude, and I only judge this from films, that for example, all Italians were mafias, they would have closed the border, registered them all and sent them back. And so the challenge today is, how do we rekindle our connection with each other's souls, with the divine in each of us and the spirit that is within all of us? And so, to our Muslim people who across the USA are faced with panic, sometimes with fear, but uncertainty in this time. And as we watch every night, the new appointments, it deepens rather than relieves. I think that the one thing we must stand on, which we didn't have in South Africa, because by definition of apartheid, we were non-citizens. And therefore we did not have the vote. Rights did not extend to us. We did not have legal and legislative protection. What you have are the rights of citizens and also the obligations of citizens. This is not the time to loosen your citizenship as Americans. This is the time to assert your citizenship as Americans and to say we have as much allegiance, because I know you sit in the immigration rooms, you've studied for it, you've worked for it, and you've had to pay to write a test for it. And so you've known it more than sometimes natural-born Americans who have not had to test what they understand of the history and what they say in the creed of the United States. So the point is, you've got to affirm it rather than let it be shaken at this moment, because that ultimately has to be your protection. Not simply Muslim citizens, but citizens of the United States. You have responsibilities also and obligations. A citizen, when he or she sees that there is danger lurking, warns about the danger, speaks about it, and reminds others about it as well. I think the second thing that we need to assert tonight is a lesson that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us. That at times like this, when there is potential harm lurking, when there's potential injustice lurking, when there is wrongdoing lurking, this is not the time to become insular. This is not the time to retreat into your own community or into the mosque. This is the time to increase your relationship with others. This is the time to increase the good that you are doing, to multiply it. Not to become insular. But most importantly, the Prophet taught us a concept called the Khilful Fudul, the coalition or the alliance for virtue. The fact that so many people are here tonight in solidarity is to you an invitation. As Muslims, they are saying to you, we want to be with you. Will you join us to secure virtue, to secure our values, to secure our principles, and to secure the rights that we are proud of as Americans? This is not an invitation you can refuse. This is not an invitation that you can refuse at the hand of saying, I'm not sure about their theology. I'm not sure about their ideology. I'm not sure about their intention. When there is a general danger, we all have to respond to it together. In South Africa, the Muslim community of South Africa understood. And we are a 350-year-old community in Cape Town, as I said in the Jumu'ah earlier. We came there to Cape Town, our ancestors, the Imams, ancestors as slaves from the Malay archipelago. Our religion was banned for an entire century. You couldn't practice it. When we were allowed to be freed from slavery and our religion at least given some space, it was not recognized. Our marriages, our divorces, our inheritance, all those things which are important to Muslims were not recognized and actively suppressed. That was Islamophobia for us. But the point is, I get very scared when he gets up. But the point is that the Muslims of South Africa understood that the best way to fight Islamophobia against Muslims was to fight anti-Semitism against Jews. The best way to fight anti-Semitism against Jews was to fight racism against blacks. The best way to fight racism against blacks was to fight xenophobia against foreigners. The best way to fight xenophobia against foreigners was to fight sexism against women. The best way to fight sexism against women was to fight homophobia against LGBT. Let God sort out who's right and who's wrong. Let's not make God unemployed. But let us be able to understand that our protection is not to be found in the selfish pursuit of our protection, but in the common collective pursuit of everyone who's vulnerable, their protection. And therefore, the coalitions for virtue, there is no better platform for that than what we see here tonight. I have been with other Muslim groups across the United States of America in this moment, in this past week. And so, I'm not exaggerating when I am saying to you, thank you very much. He's been very generous. So I say to you that what people are putting up are, for example, hotlines for civil defense, that where someone, whether Muslim, Hispanic, or women, or whoever, face insults or dangers, that there's a number to call and to then establish a relationship with the police so that we do not take our injury and turn it into extremism. Legal defense, lawyers coming together across religious lines in order to say that where we need to defend the dignity of people and advance the Constitution and put the Constitution as our wall, our bulwark against what could happen if the highest office in this land is not going to defend the Constitution, citizens would have to do that, but not in ways which encourage militias or anything, but by putting together groups of lawyers who, again, working with the authorities, working with the government that we have, can be able to speak the Constitution when others suppress it. I think what we would need further to do is to understand that unlike us in apartheid South Africa who do not enjoy the rights of democracy, you do that. There are elections coming up in 2017. There are elections coming up in subsequent years. And the main obligation of citizenship, if you know why it is that South Africans, every election since 1994, our election turnout was 80% of registered voters, because we know how many died for us to get that vote. And it is shocking to the world to know that you have a president elected with only about 25% of the registered voters of the United States of America. That cannot be a mistake that should ever be repeated again, simply because someone was too lazy, someone was too disenchanted, so into themselves, their own problems, their own disaffections, that they could not muster themselves to get to the polling booth. And so, if I can use a crude term, the best revenge is to change the balance in Congress, the Senate, and everywhere else. That needs to happen. That is the rights of citizenship. And so, I think that those are absolutely crucial things. But even, as I said in the earlier prayer, that out of difficulty comes ease. We've got to find the ease. We've got to find the hope. We've got to find the optimism. And it is not going to descend on us from the heavens. It's going to have to come from within us. We have to build that optimism and that hope. And so the question is, how do we set about? There may be a house in Washington that will have the effect of dividing people. But from the ground must come the instinct to reconcile and unite people. How would we be able to do that? And how would we have campaigns that would do that? And I think that that's the challenge that we face tonight. I think that this campaign to renew, refresh, and get America back to its finest starts tonight, given how many of you are here, and not only how many of you are here, who all are here. I think that there is no better platform to do the job that must be done. It may start off with defense, but in defense comes a great advance. Out of that advance comes the defense primarily of the Constitution and the American values. We must treat this last election not simply as an election, but a referendum. And it's a referendum that tells us we have work to do. Thank you very much.